Tommy, 1202, you ready? Cool. Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Charter School Capital webinar this morning. We're going to be discussing with you the no-cost bond alternative. We're thankful that you joined. The agenda is rather simple. We're going to go through a couple of points and make sure that we level set who we are, the framework and foundation of how to analyze your facilities transaction, and then share with you a new alternative, and of course, save questions for time. A couple of housekeeping notes. We're supported in the background by Brittany Smith, who is going to help keep us on track. You can chat her or you can chat Tommy. I'm not listed as a presenter, so feel free to chat the group or to chat Tommy or Brittany directly. We'll incorporate those questions as they go. You can screenshot all of these if you'd like, but rest assured, we'll send you this presentation and our contact information will be coming to you. So by way of background, you see Tommy, he's waving his hand. He's in LA. I'm in North Carolina. We're part of the team at Charter School Capital. I lead the facility, or I'm the vice president of facilities. Tommy is the head of our underwriting group. Tommy's a new dad. I'm an empty nester. He likes to cycle. I like to golf and do CrossFit. And COVID has done to us what it's done to you. So we're trying to stay sane. And the new normal is webinars. So bear with us and plug in and let's get started. So here we go. Charter School Capital is, our story, right, is 13 years old. Today, specifically, we're going to talk, or 14 years old. Today, specifically, we're going to talk about our facilities. We're going to focus on that. We are a group that provides facilities financing in the states that are noted above. We've been doing it for 10 years. We've acquired, more than 50 properties. I think we acquired one last week, so I think that slide is maybe out of date. But we are a nationwide service provider, specialty service provider for charter schools. We can help with facilities financing. We can help you with working capital. We have services for marketing. We have services to make your building more efficient. We have services that are safe, that can make your building safer. We are totally embedded in your mission. We want to support you and serve you. And our goal is to serve as many kids as possible with our products and services. So reach out to us offline, ping us on the website, our contact information, but please feel free to give us a call. Some of the buildings that some of the pictures, they may look like yours. They may not look like yours. They may look like what you dream about. We're looking to serve facility clients with kids of all shapes and all sizes, colors, stripes, tall ones, wide ones, polka dotted ones. We don't care. We don't have a geographic limitation on how we can support you from a facilities perspective. So there we go. Tommy, with that as a backdrop, do you want to walk the schools through what they should be thinking about from a framework, please?
Yeah. Thanks, John. Making sure everyone can hear me here. Can you hear me, John? Great. So, we've really tried to boil this webinar down to, some takeaways that we think are pretty critical in order to, best assess a facilities related decision point. So we're going to start with what we call a school-centered facility framework, kind of looking at what you should really consider in terms of the facilities related decisions. We've got a few examples here. The first being matching your facility or facilities to your mission. So you might have a really strong athletics program that may require, a massive gym, with bleachers and seating, or, in order to have a legitimate sports program. You might have an arts program and you need a stage. You might be a STEM program and need lab space. So I think it's a strong consideration that obviously, every school operator on this webinar has considered, and we consider on our end, helping on the facilities front as well. Another item being term length. How long are you sort of tethered to a facility, right? And if it's a lease, that would be your lease term. If it's a bond transaction, that might be your bond term. But ultimately thinking about the term. We'll get into, a little bit around expansions and how we can accommodate those through the solution we're presenting here. But, ultimately there are a lot of opportunities for phasing expansions in the future, with a different set of amenities or additional classroom space to increase capacity. We've also got path to ownership, kind of as we see it, the sort of crown jewel of a school operator is ultimately being able to determine your own destiny as a school. And the best way to do that is really to own your facility at the end of the day. So we've got covenants in here as well, and a handful of other items that we'll be getting into. But these are all just considerations to kind of keep in mind. We call this, the traditional framework for evaluating a facility's financing related decision. So we've got a formula here, right? And we've kind of sort of summarized it in terms of flexibility as a trade-off to stability. And either one of those things is equal to a cost, right? So it has this cost that's proportionate to either a flexible solution or a stable solution. So examples of that, some flexible solutions might give you the ability to adapt and change and relocate or replicate or move. Flexible solutions also just offer different options, right? Paths to ownership potentially, or maybe just the ability to move on from your existing facility if you outgrow it, so on and so forth. Stable solutions, are generally pretty predictable. We'll get into some examples, but they're usually constant and permanent, and they have some sort of fixed price associated with them. So you can project out several years with a stable solution and know that you're going to have, the space that you need in terms of the facility long term. And the cost is simply the price paid to obtain either one of these solutions, right? So what essentially you give up in order to have either that flexible or that stable solution. Another way of terming this in the finance world, we call it an opportunity cost, but it really just is ultimately what you're giving up to obtain the benefit of something else. Now, we're going to illustrate this concept of flexibility versus stability a little more here with some kind of descriptor here. So we have these two axes, right? Flexibility and stability. And ultimately, we're going to get into some examples of what increases flexibility. That might be a shorter term option. You might have the ability to get buyout options at multiple points throughout your lease. Lease renewals, right? So a tenant or a school being able to renew its lease at its own discretion for up to 15 or 20 or even 25 years. Ultimately, those are what we would see as flexible solutions. Lack of covenants and the ability to expand, of course. What increases stability? Things like long-term ownership, longer-term leases or longer-term bond solutions, and fixed or predictable payments, as we mentioned earlier. So now we'll go into some examples with those in mind. The most flexible solution and generally the least stable is going to be a short-term lease. A totally opposite end of the spectrum, a self-issued bond, which a lot of people on this call have probably heard about bonds. Maybe you've self-issued your own bonds. Maybe you've heard a little bit about a wonderful foundation solution, which we'll get into here in this deck. But a self-issued bond is really the most stable and in a lot of ways the least flexible solution. In the middle, you've got this sort of long-term lease solution, which is a pretty stable and somewhat flexible solution. But what we've been able to do is sort of incorporate with the strategic partnership, which we'll get into later, this concept of not only a long-term lease with buyout options, but going a step further and being able to include facilities in a publicly issued tax-exempt bond issuance. So with this no-cost bond alternative, we'll get into more detail, but we see it as the best way to maximize both flexibility and stability. So we'll get into a case study here, assuming a $5 million purchase price on an existing building, right? The building, let's just assume, is move-in ready, and the purchase price is $5 million, and that's been all contemplated and agreed to. So we'll look at two different options, one a traditional bond and one a CSC lease option. And for the purposes of this analysis, we're going to assume a 6% interest rate on the bond with a 15% cost of issuance. So instead of $5 million, you've got an additional 15% that you would need to add on top of that and capitalize as part of the bond the total bond amount. And that's the principal on which you would be paying the bond payments or the interest. We are assuming a 10-year lockout period, and we're comparing this bond option with the CSC lease option. So at face value, you see, oh, okay, the lease option is at 7%. That's 1% higher than the bond option at 6%, with 2% escalations and a couple buyout options in years 3 and 10. So what we're going to do, and we'll run through these, but we'll start with the annual payment comparison, right? So you can see in orange, you've got this bond option, right? And the pricing in year 1, obviously the bond, given it's a higher principal amount, right? That extra 15% is the primary contributor to the premium cost of the bond. You can see the lease option is $350,000 a year, and the bond option is $418,000 a year. It's not until year 10 of both of those terms that those prices equal out, right? That the cost is the same between a bond and a lease option. And you have to go all the way out to year 18 in order to get, which we'll get to here, the break-even point, right? So this is the cumulative payment on the right side of the slide, where you can see in year 3, years 10, and year 18 here, the break-even points. So it's not until year 18 that you've paid roughly to date the same amount for the bond option and the lease option. But keep in mind, you've been able to take whatever capital you have earlier on and reallocate it to school operations and other more critical needs, assuming you have this excess capital through your lease option. So we've got, oh, well, John's going to take over here and speak to the no-cost bond alternative. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Tommy. So as Tommy mentioned, the no-cost bond alternative, if we can go to the next slide, is really a partnership between Wonderful Foundations. Wonderful Foundations was started by 2 folks who really wanted to bring philanthropic dollars and support and expand the charter school movement to all students, not just certain students in certain zip codes with certain needs that usually get and traditionally get a larger portion of existing philanthropic dollars. So Wonderful Foundation was created, and they took a look at how can we use real estate to expand the reach and the support that we can give. And what they found is that they're working, one of their partnerships is with Citibank. They are a client of ours, and we provide their servicing. So we are doing the heavy lifting, this webinar, for example, and we support the Wonderful Foundations, managing their schools, helping them put schools into their foundation, doing all the heavy lifting that's not core to their foundation. That's our role at Charter School Capital. Wonderful Foundation took the lease structure that is prevalent and the bond structure that is available to some but not all, and they mushed them together. And they said, what if we become the landlord for schools, and we Wonderful Foundation use the tax exempt bond market as a financing source. They take that burden off of the school so that the schools can benefit through the foundation with that efficient financing, but they don't have the work, time, hassle, and headache of doing their own bond. And there's a critical component to that partnership and to closing the loop. There's a bunch of technical partners. Citibank did the underwriting. They're highly sophisticated financial service provider. There's Charter School Capital, who's mission driven and has been in the charter school space for 14 years. And there's Wonderful Foundation that wants to change the world. That loop doesn't complete unless schools and your peer group says, yes, I get it. I want to benefit. We understand. And I think that the first proof point came in July of 2020, when Wonderful issued their first set of bonds for 13 schools. So there are now 13 schools that are in the Wonderful Foundation's portfolio. And there's a team of us at Charter School Capital. Tommy looks really good considering how much hair has been on fire lately. We're doing another set of those bonds for 10 more schools in May. and it's a big lift. We're super fired up to do it, but if you want to go out and search, you're going to find articles, back in July, of what the really wonderful is doing. And it's an exciting time as they take traditional things and give them a significant twist, and they become revolutionary. And that's really where wonderful is at. So let's go back to that equation that Tommy talked about, right? Everybody's looking for some flexibility. Everybody needs some level of stability, and cost is a driver. Well, instead of it being a trade-off, Wonderful said, why don't we build a scenario, build a solution for schools that has flexibility and it has stability, and we, Wonderful, find a way to push that cost down and deliver value without sacrificing the elements of flexibility and stability. And that's really what Wonderful has done. Wonderful takes the lease structure. Wonderful is your land. Wonderful would be your landlord. Wonderful uses a long-term lease structure as the connection point and the contract between your school and them as the landlord. But they finance it through the bond market, like we talked about. So in getting there, you get that feeling of ownership and that path to owning your building, but you don't go through the time of doing a bond. You don't have the covenants associated with the bond. You don't have the restrictions associated with the bonds. And when Tommy talked about getting a bond, those reserves, that 15% cost of issuance, you don't pay any of that in the Wonderful Foundation's transaction. It's all absorbed by Wonderful. So it's literally cheaper and easier and less brain damage for you to enter that pool. Then once you get there, stability, right? It feels like you're owning. You're there forever, and at the end of the bond term, Wonderful is going to gift you the building. So you've made payments, and at the end, you have the building. And along the way, your landlord is mission driven and aligned and understands intuitively and explicitly charter schools. The Wonderful Foundation's board is stacked with former leaders, policymakers, in classroom administrators. This isn't a board that is unaware of what the challenges you're facing. So you've got a mission-driven landlord that knows what you're trying to do and is there to help you do it. And then, like I said, along the way, we've talked about them. There's no transaction fees for you to join into this. It's literally just transferring your lease. Then Wonderful, as in their foundation, in their giving program, they're going to return to schools on an annual basis a portion of their revenue. They literally give back to participating schools cash. It's a cash to cash, nonprofit to nonprofit donation. It's unrestricted. You can use it to reduce your rent. You can use it to buy iPads. You can pay teacher bonuses. You can use it for development. It literally is up to you and your discretion. And then again, when we talk about differences between self-financed bonds and the Wonderful Foundation solution, Wonderful has created a capital reserve fund for capital maintenance and reserve. So the roof that you may need, or the HVAC system that you may need, the concrete repair that you may need, all of those expenses to keep your building safe and efficient that you're going to incur at some point in time, Wonderful has set aside funds that are specifically earmarked for participating schools to help defray some of those costs. And so when you put all of those elements back together and you look at the pluses and the minuses and you compare it, Wonderful is really excited because according to their math that we've helped them with, this is a huge opportunity for your school to, again, have some flexibility, have certainty and stability, and then have that all at a cost that is usually less than the cost of doing it yourself. And that's really the concept. That's what we wanted to talk about today. and there are some questions that are flowing in. And I'm going to take a minute and take a breath, and then Brittany, we'll just go through those questions if they're relevant, and other ones that come in.
Great. Yeah, the first one is we have recently purchased a facility that we are leasing. Since we own the building, do we provide funds for capital improvements?
Tommy, you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. The answer to that is yes, most definitely. You know, we've worked really hard to build a framework that, you know, really provides whatever capital needs at a facility level are relevant for the schools that are included. So whether it's, you know, a phased approach, you know, or a massive capital improvement out of the gate, those are definitely things that we can capitalize with bond proceeds and include in these pooled wonderful foundation issuances that we're speaking to here.
Yeah. And I think Tommy didn't mention, but not only can we, but we have. There were specific schools in the first issuance of 13 schools where the expansion that was either in flight or was planned to be in flight to the point that it could be contracted and understood and quantified, we helped wonderful fund that at the same time. There's two questions that came in from New York. One is, yes, we do service the state of New York. And the second question that came in related was, have you done bond issuance in New York? And the answer to that is no, we have not done a bond issuance in the state of New York. But yes, we can provide this service to schools in New York. The bond issuance process, I'm sure some of the attendees can understand what a pain that is. There are very specific hoops you have to jump through in certain states. They're different, New York to California to Wisconsin, but they're largely the same. You've got to show a plan. You've got to make sure it works. It's got to be blessed and signed off 16 ways from Sunday, and then you're off to the races. So it's not a hurdle we've crossed, but it's a hurdle that we can jump over when the time is right.
I see there's another question here about the comparable annual cost, going back to the $5 million purchase example. So I can go back here in the deck and we can revisit this concept of annual payment. Let's go back to the assumptions really quick, but you can see the traditional bond again at 6%, the CSC lease option at 7%. And keep in mind that 15% cost of issuance for the bond. So if that's capitalized, it's not actually a $5.0 million building value or total capitalization. It's going to be $5.75 million under the bond option. And this interest rate is going to have an amortization included in the total bond payment. So it's not just 6% interest only. You're actually paying a portion of the principal down, that initial 5.75 million each year. So that's a lot of the reason for the increased cost at the beginning of the bond term relative to the CSC lease option, which is just a flat 7% on the $5 million building value. Now, there was a question around, or there's questions around the annual cost. So it's a tricky answer in that the annual cost for the leased option changes over time. It escalates by 2% annually, and that's compounding escalations. But you're starting at $350,000. So it's not until you're 18 in the cumulative payment table that those costs all in over the full 18 years it equals out, right? So I'm hoping that answers the question here. But the bond payments remain fixed at $418,000 every year. So you can see year 1, 10, and 18 fixed, and year 1, 10, and 18 for the lease option. Those costs actually increase from $350,000 ultimately to $490,000. But if you tally all of the expenses over every year, you can see in the cumulative table that those expenses equal out at about year 18. So the concept here is, we've been able to provide in certain cases, if the school already has a purchase option and we want to honor that, ultimately we put it outside of this sort of break point, so that we can provide the school maximum savings up until, in this case, let's say year 18 under the lease solution, and also provide the school with its own option to break the lease and ultimately find another capitalization or capital solution elsewhere. So they could find at that point that the bond markets are really strong and they've grown to a point that they can self-issue a bond, or they've got substantially increased credit or enrollment, and we can provide in certain instances a purchase option outside of this period to be able to maximize both, again, the flexibility but also the cost savings through that initial 18 years. Okay, it looks like.
Tommy, I was gonna jump in on a couple of other ones that are coming in. Go ahead.
Yeah.
A couple of simple ones. A question was asked: does the cost of land is that included in financing and the upfit of an existing building qualify? Absolutely. That is a falling out of bed transaction. So yes, that's a simple one. And somewhat related to that, an attendee asked, they own their building, or they completed the financing with a mortgage, and they want to expand on it. Can we help with that? Yes, that's a very simple transaction as well. I'm assuming, not certain, but I'm assuming that your mortgage has an ability to prepay it. We could simply help you finance paying off your mortgage, roll that debt into another solution, and as Tommy's mentioned, you take the debt that is in your mortgage plus the $1.5 to $2 million you need to finish the expansion. We put it in a bundle and we take it to Wonderful and we package it up that way. That's a really, again, that is not a hard transaction, provided you've got the flexibility in your mortgage to pay it off at your choosing. Tommy, there was another question about, have we worked with any schools in New Jersey? The answer is we have worked with some schools in New Jersey, but we have not formally funded schools in New Jersey. Shouldn't be a problem, but no, we can't yet call any clients. We can't yet call any schools in New Jersey our clients.
Yep. There's another question here about if a school has immediate facility maintenance or improvements required, can those be included in the bond issuance? Which the answer to that is yes. It depends on the nature of the improvements, but generally, if those improvements are tied to the actual facility, for instance, John had mentioned HVAC needs, you might need to replace your HVAC units or repair them, or you might need to completely replace your roof. Those can absolutely be included if they are technically deferred maintenance items or items that need to be addressed immediately. Those can be included in the total capitalization, and we would just build that into the initial cost basis at the individual property level.
Hey, Tommy, there's two questions. I think that I can relate them. Somebody asked the question, are we brokers for Wonderful? And then another question came in, are we conduit issuers? I think I saw that. Let me just grab that again. Bear with me, folks. Yes, are you conduit issuers or do you place bonds? Our relationship with Wonderful, we're a service provider for Wonderful. We are their servicer. So Wonderful has contracted with Charter School Capital to, I'll work at the back of the funnel. No, I'll work at the front of the funnel. We do all of their marketing and property acquisition, the diligence, and finishing the transaction to acquire properties, and then run them through the funding process, which is partnered with Citi to get them into the Wonderful Foundation. Once they're in the Wonderful Foundation, Charter School Capital continues to manage the property and service the properties for Wonderful. So we're a service provider, if you will, for Wonderful. And then the other question, I think I've just answered. We are not a conduit issuer. Those are all issued through other agencies. Tommy, I'm sure if you quoted all the agencies that Mike Dang would probably recognize them, but we're not the issuer of those bonds.
That's right.
Hey, Tommy, do you want to take the question that was what's the profile of school qualifications and requirements to qualify for this financing?
Profile of school qualifications requirements. Sure. Yeah, it's it's a tough question to answer very briefly, but ultimately, what we go through, as John had mentioned, we at Charter School Capital run through a lot of the diligence at the asset level, the property level, just diligencing the physical property itself, making sure that environmentally there are no issues, or that structurally there are no issues, and ultimately that the valuation is commensurate with whatever the purchase price is. We also run a lot of tenant level or credit level analysis at the charter level. So qualifications, we have certain criteria that we know the bondholder community is amenable to in terms of the overall credit that goes into or that comprises these pools of assets. So without getting into too much detail, it's really, there are certain coverages and certain levels of financial stability that we just look for. We also do some diligence in terms of the school board and the operator, just to try and vet through the team and make sure it's a school operation that ultimately we can build into a narrative and sell to the bondholder community. Because that's the bondholders really rely on our analysis and our narrative in order to support the overall credit and corresponding pricing of the actual bonds. So under the scenarios we've been describing, all of the properties included in the first bond issuance we closed last July, as well as the incoming 10 schools that are going to be included in a bond issuance this coming May, they're all supported by lease agreements. So that's a requirement. It's a qualification to have a lease agreement that has some sort of substantial term to it. So by term, I mean lease term. We try and get up to 20 or 15 to 20-year lease terms and provide renewal options to the schools at their sole discretion. So I would say, as long as you have a lease, you're a tenant in good standing with the terms of that lease, you're paying your rent payments, and ultimately in a financially stable position such that you can support those rent payments going forward. Those are really the core qualifications that we look for.
And Tommy's the head of underwriting and the risk guy, and I've got a risk background, but I'm the business guy in this role. I say yes to everybody. So everything Tommy has said is true, and there's a mission that our team also takes to it, is that there's more than one way to skin the cat. So there's certain hurdles that we have to cross. We can cross them different ways. The question was raised, what's the smallest amount of capital will you consider? There is no limit. And the reason I say that is because Charter School Capital, with its partnership with Wonderful, has a sweet spot, but Charter School Capital has other solutions that might not involve Wonderful. So I want to be broad in our thinking, Candace, that call us. We can probably help you in some form or fashion. And if we can't, we'll refer you to somebody who can. We really, back to the point I made earlier, some financing organizations have a very small box that they're trying to hit. No problem with that. That box is small for them for a reason. Our box is intentionally wide for a reason. And the Charter School Capital has done a transaction. I've been with Charter School Capital almost 10 years now. We did one transaction in Florida that was $36,000. That was the amount of funding that school needed. We've also done transactions that are greater than 35 million. So we're willing to help, and we're not going to put an arbitrary limit on the number. So that's my invitation to all of you.
I see there are a few more questions here about how many years a school needs to be in existence in order to be considered for inclusion. It again is I just want to kind of clarify that, ultimately we work with schools at all levels of the life cycle, right? They might be, startup schools, they might be, early stage or growth stage schools, they might be completely stabilized schools that are looking to replicate or, ultimately add new locations. So it depends on where you fall in there. If it's a brand new operator with a brand new school that just got its charter, generally we try and get that school to some level of stabilization outside of a bond issuance and then roll them in. There are exceptions to that. If it's a really experienced operator that's starting a brand new school, or if it's an operator that is replicating a school, so it's technically a new school, but it's part of a bigger network, those can be considered immediately because we can rely on the track record of the operator and build that into this narrative that I was speaking to earlier. In terms of academic performance thresholds, every state has a different kind of metric and a different system. So we don't have a hard, fast, really simple answer to that. But generally, we do look at the academic performance and we take into account, what kind of community that school serves, and we build that into the narrative as well. So you might have a socioeconomically disadvantaged community, and your academic performance may not be as strong as one that is not. And if that's the case, then that's just support for whatever the academic performance is. It may be completely the opposite, but we've seen that example a couple times, and ultimately it's not prohibiting that school from inclusion. It just warrants having the narrative built around it. We do provide construction support, and we do have alternative forms of financing. However, if we do provide some sort of financing, we feel really strongly that this wonderful foundation's kind of pooled tax-exempt bond issuance really is the ultimate benefit to the schools. So if we were providing financing, it would be an effort to get these schools into some sort of pooled issuance with wonderful foundations, or to support the school in its journey if they wanted to self-issue those bonds. The point of the wonderful pooled issuance really is to provide another solution that gives the schools a path to ownership. It gives the school a bunch of benefits along the way, access to capital for repairs that John had mentioned earlier, annual donations, property tax exemptions if you don't already qualify for them. So there are a handful of solutions or benefits that we see as part of that wonderful solution. So ultimately, everything we're doing is really trying to support those pooled issuances. There was another question about how long the process usually is before breaking ground. I think that's in reference to a ground up project. It depends on the entitlement process. It depends on the district or the state. Some cities are more efficient in terms of the entitlement process than others. So if you're speaking to a ground up project, it could be anywhere from 6 to 12 months if it truly is ground up. In order to actually if you have all the third parties engaged, generally planning stage can take 2 to 3 months before you can break ground, assuming you hit the right seasons. But from inception of a transaction and, hey, I've got an idea, I want to build a school, it's usually 3 to 6 months, I would say, before you can start putting shovels in the ground. I don't know, John, I don't know if you see any more questions you wanted to address here. I see a few flowing in, but.
Yeah, I think that was the last one. I answered the person who was posing that question was in North Carolina. So that question went away. That was, you got it. Mike had some questions about the qualifications. We answered Candace. Brittany, I think, have we missed anything in the scroll, Brittany? I think we're close, Tommy.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything new.
Oh, great.
Okay. Well, I think that's a wrap. Tommy, for those people who just can't help themselves with the screen grabs, do you want to throw our contact information up there?
Yes,
please.
Absolutely.
So as I said, again, Tom and I would love to talk to you. So a little bit more about Charter School of Capital. There's a distributed client services force that's positioned around the country. Tommy's part of our corporate office on the West Coast. I'm part of our corporate office, but I'm based in Charlotte. We'd be happy to get you to the right person. If it's not us, we will get you to the right person for the right service and the right geography. Don't hesitate. We'd love to talk to you about all things charters. We were focused pretty hard on facilities, but as I mentioned, we're here to serve and support you all in a wide range of services and funding options. And, I've been with the company 10 years. I started in business development. Our growth model has changed. We used to go to where we thought all the kids were and all the schools were, and we'd plant a flag and we say, here, we're here. And that doesn't work. 4 or 5 of the last states that we've entered with partners. We've entered with schools who understand what we do, how we do it, why we do it, and said, hey, will you come help us? So if you have a need, call us, because we would love to partner with you as opposed to just blaze a trail and wait for somebody to show up. So again, thank you all for your time. Our contact information is here. Brittany, I hope I'm not overstating. Everybody's going to get a copy of this presentation. Is that correct?
Yes, they will.
Okay. That's great. Well, thank you all. I appreciate it. Tommy, I'm going to give you the last word.
Thanks, John. Yeah, no, it's a pleasure presenting to everyone on this kind of thing. I mean, we specialize in this and we work in it every day. So for us, it's second nature in a lot of ways, but we understand that, these solutions and these facilities related decision points can be challenging and overwhelming at times. So again, at the end of the day, we're really trying to find solutions that ultimately support the school missions and the students and the families, ultimately that those schools serve. So I think we've hopefully been able to give a little more information around this bond solution. Again, it has the schools in mind at the end of the day, and hopefully it's something you can consider. And to John's point, if you have any questions, you've got our contact information on there. Feel free to reach out whenever you'd like.